All right, Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Yes, we are talking about Hakeem Jeffries. So when House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries promised that Kristi Noem would be one of the first called before Congress, which he did this past week, if the Democrats take the majority in 2026, he wasn't just previewing political theater, he was signaling a long overdue accountability moment.
It's my expectation that Kristi Noem will be one of the first people hauled up to Congress shortly after the gavels change hands to get a real understanding for the American people as to this conduct that has taken place, the lack of respect for due process, for the rule of law, the unleashing of masked agents on law-abiding immigrant communities, and the disappearing of people.
Because what we've seen under Noem's watch as Homeland Security Secretary isn't just controversial, it's policy. I mean, it's a collision between power and the Constitution. Listen, the government has every right to deport violent criminals. Everyone's on the same page about that. What we're talking about here is not that. These are families being ripped apart, U.S. citizen children deported to other countries they'd never known, and raids on churches, swap meets, and sidewalks that read less like lawful arrest and more like kidnappings in broad daylight. Armed masked agents storming neighborhoods. It looks less like Law and Order and more like a scene from maybe a dystopian movie, except it's not fiction. It's happening right here. And at the center of it is Secretary Noem, who, when asked to define habeas corpus earlier this year, which, by the way, is a bedrock constitutional right, got it flat out wrong. Let's take a listen.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas
right
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
Now, that's not just a slip of the tongue. That's a fundamental misunderstanding of the very principle that protects us all from government overreach. Habeas corpus is the right of a person to challenge their detention. Without it, the government could just lock anyone up indefinitely. Even Abraham Lincoln had to go to Congress before suspending it during the Civil War. Yet somehow, Kristi Noem thinks she can redefine it on the fly. Meanwhile, lawsuits are just piling up. The ACLU and others say these mass raids aren't about justice. They're really about quotas. 3,000 arrests a day demanded from the White House no matter who gets caught in the dragnet. The result, overcrowded dungeon-like detention centers, families denied food, water, and lawyers. That's not just cruel, it's really unconstitutional. And it costs taxpayers millions of dollars also to warehouse people who pose no threat to society. So Jeffries is right. This calls for oversight, not partisan point scoring, but a public examination of what happens when immigration policy is driven by fear, politics, and raw numbers instead of law and due process and human dignity. Because if the government can strip immigrants of their rights today, what's to stop them from doing the same thing to citizens tomorrow? Kristi Noem may soon face Congress, but make no mistake, this is bigger than her. It's about whether America will continue to twist the meaning of justice until it serves whoever holds power, or whether we'll insist that justice in this country still means something. This isn't about Kristi Noem forgetting her civics lesson. It's about whether America still remembers its own. So listen, immigration is President Trump's biggest issue, right? He was winning on the fact that we're going to deport violent criminals and go about that. But as you've seen, and as polls have shown us in the last 7 months, public opinion of how he's going about handling immigration has dramatically swayed.
Has it?
Yeah, actually, there's an Economist YouGov poll from this summer saying 52% of Americans think that President Trump's approach to immigration has been, quote, too harsh. And some of the ways that he's treating people, even going into LA with federal troops, was completely unnecessary, overstepping local government, which is not something that Republicans generally do. There's a lot of ways that he's handling it that, to the American public is not the way that they wanted to see happen.
I don't agree that it's not the way necessarily the American people want to see. I've seen polls showing broad support for exactly what Donald Trump is doing. I find it very interesting that the Democrats' plan, as soon as they have power again, is going to be to do weaponized lawfare, deep state stuff against Kristi Noem. So we're just conceding now that, or I hope liberals are conceding, Democrats are no better than Republicans. It's all the same. Once another party gets into power, they will pursue whatever legal actions they can against all of the members of the previous regime. They'll try to put Donald Trump in prison again, and then Republicans will do that to Democrats, and Democrats will do that to Republicans. I don't think that's good, and I would like to see my Democrats, aspire to something a little bit more lofty.
That's so interesting that you call for that type of lofty aspiration when you don't require that from any Republicans. But we'll just put a pin right there.
Well,
and
Republicans
just say,
are my party.
I mean, that's literally like they want to. They're doing it in Russiagate investigation for no reason right now, and
No,
wasting
for the reason is they tried to again jail President Trump over.
And they were trying to attach treason to President Obama, which they know is extreme far shot and never happening. And so they're wasting the same amount of time. But this is actually legitimate to look into how or whether or not we're following constitutional law when we're deporting and detaining migrants, and if we're doing it constitutionally or based on quotas, and if we're following everyone's due process, because we've seen multiple incidents where we were not. And it's not a Lindsey thing. This is not a Democratic thing. This is also a Republican thing. This is a Joe Rogan thing. He brought it up to Anna Paulina Luna on his podcast last week saying, great, deport my landscaper. Basically arguing how Americans feel, even where he stands, people who voted for President Trump saying this was not the intention. It's one thing to deport criminals and everyone you said you were going to deport. It's another thing to just straight up willy-nilly just try to get everyone out of the country, because there's multiple businesses and people that voted for President Trump that don't think that that is the strategy and the way forward. You could talk about farmers, people who own farmland. There's multiple industries that are going to suffer because migrants are just being deported in the way that President Trump is doing it. So when you look at those polls and wonder why there's such mixed reaction on how he's going about it, it's because what was promised is that, yeah, get these criminals out of here. That's a pretty American thing. Everyone can understand that. But on the other side of that is just sweepingly get everyone out of here and do it without following the Constitution. That's an issue and should be an issue regardless of party.
Well, I think we should follow the Constitution. I don't think we should deport landscapers, although there are a lot of Trump supporters who want everyone who's here illegally to go, come hell or high water, and it should be done in a constitutional manner, in a manner that abides by due process. Although oftentimes due process is not some kind of paper shield that means you can't be deported or you can't suffer some adverse criminal action. It just means there has to be a process. For instance, in the case of every liberal's favorite illegal immigrant, Abrego Garcia, there was due process. The end of the process was he had to be deported back to his native country. Now, things should be done according to the precepts of the Constitution and according to what the Supreme Court says. I have no doubt the government is overreaching in a variety of ways that trouble me as a civil libertarian. I don't want to see mass deportations of otherwise lawful people, but just because it's happening doesn't mean it's illegal or violates some. You say quotas. I mean, there's a mandate clearly to deport a massive number of illegal immigrants. They don't have a right legally to be in this country. They have a right against being prosecuted, incarcerated, having their speech rights violated, but being in the country is not something that that right does not exist, and their rights against the government are a little bit murkier than the rights of citizens or rights of even non-citizens in a criminal action.
And I think just to bring Kristi Noem before Congress and just ask the questions about how they're going about this and how they're following the Constitution is not a bad thing. We talk about what Congress doesn't do or, making it too partisan. But I think this is a real question to ask, because there are people like the Joe Rogans of the world and his millions of followers that are saying, hey, seems like a real overreach. And so that's the whole point of checks and balances. And what Congress should do is say, are you guys overreaching here? Are you outside of the confines of our law that we have set up? And then check it from there. And I think that is not a bad thing for him to say, but just feels partisan because it came from Hakeem Jeffries.
Well, we'll see if they ever get power over Congress again, and they can do exactly that. They can have another committee hearing. So many committee hearings, so little time. Coming up next, President Trump is vowing to end mail-in ballots and voting machines. Sounds like a good idea, maybe? Stay with us.